Greetings! High calculation lines, space-time creator line, position operation cycles, stargates, star panels, star maps, mapping location line, connection, electrical line, communication, set, high center interference, intrusion location setting, database locations, digitalized calculation, high calculation position, all those operation cycles, line communications, compute screen interference, mapping positions of pi. Tracking communication lines of interference is really understand how to set your location in the settings, really understand your set locations. We have very powerful line conditions, right? 40 line communications over track line conditions of traffic flow. Everybody wants the answers. It's amazing what we're coming into, right? More levels of awareness. So it all starts lines all communication inside line conditioning settings, right? Understand the multiple levels of you is understanding the multiple levels of you inside. The imagination is already there. The access is already there. The memory is already there. You just have to be aware of it. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's just opening it up. That's the most beautiful thing. But because you contradict yourself, because you get into separation, because you get into confusion, you're losing everything of its volume of you through mass and anything through space-time, through travel. So these are the things you have to get out of. To understand you through process is to all line center location your settings, anything through fractions, anything through trigonometry, anything through equation, anything through algebra. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If it works for you, so be it. That's what it's all about. You coming into your own program setting. Nobody's going to tell you otherwise. Understanding your own coding system. Whoa. Things can go on so many lines calculations. Not understanding direct line connections to your Earth, your calculations, your astral projections, or anything that you see and perceive in projection, or anything in line calculation, your soul, how to travel through lights and all formation set locations, all through identifications. And once you get into your planes, whoa, look at what you can do through your travel, right? But you have to identify yourself, all through face recognition. Now, the time sequence lines of correlation calculation lines of mapping sequence, we got into the webbing of your hand settings, right? So it's really, really paying attention to more levels of you through how you set the calculations. Point lines of track lines of the thumb, line condition of the sun, track location, crossover. Same correlation setting of 4-track vision, sets communication, all right? So there's so many ways of setting up electrical line grid, webbing system, all through calculation line conditioning modifications. Sky grids, sky nets, sky panels, sky ports, high center interference travels, modulation screens, high correlation track lines, Wi-Fi modems, in and out, and audio. Each finger has in, out, and audio. It has to, because it has its own settings and allocations. What you have, it also has, but it already understands the existence of its awareness, of its consciousness, of its operation. So it's here. It's right here, right now, in its own technology, trying to understand you through provision, right? The hand itself doesn't need to understand its system because it's already here in operation. It's you have to understand why you have hands. It's you understanding why you wear a watch. It's you understanding why you have to wear glasses. It's you understanding why you have hair, right? What is hair, right? Is that me? Is that me? My glasses, my shirt that I wear, is that me in set position? It's all levels of awareness, right? So to understand that through relation is inside you. That's who you are, not who you think you are. And I keep saying that over and over. The outside of you is just the illusion that protects everything inside of you, right? Now, you could say that in so many lines that high calculation be precarious or line conditions are precocious or anything that line division lines and screen lines high calculating your system. So you can be a pessimist or you can be an optimist. You choose. You choose where you want to be. You choose where you want to be in your reality. You choose where you want to be in your frequencies. You choose where you want to be in your line condition settings and travel, all through your settings of dualities. You choose that. Nobody else does. But understanding it is understanding you through all formation and track locations, right? Anything through set lines is a measure, scale, balance. So everything I say and how I say it is all provision of frequency, right? It doesn't matter if I go blue, baby, da, baby, da, baby, da, doesn't matter. It doesn't make sense to you, but it makes sense to me, right? Because I'm using the frequencies to match its pattern, all through its binary. That's all it is. The universe is you. Glorious to one see is to know thy line setting and line positions all levels of its abundance of manifestation. Come with thy hither in line rotations of thy center. Set position, attract locations, all levels of formation, location, its calculation. Right? It doesn't matter what I say because it's frequency. It's all levels of me through energy. Your body capacitor lines the setting of vast of volume in position of velocity to acceleration to Mach. The mind is the foundation. The brain is the computer. You, the setting, the mind, the heart, the body, the soul, the mind, the heart, the soul, the body. Doesn't matter. It knows what it is, and all lines of all travel. So you never out in any way in chronological order until you add emotion. Your body capacitor has to turn into response. Now, once you understand that, in position locations, you connect with your earth, your air, your water, your fire. 4 track lines, 5 position lines, 5 elements of space lines of time. 2 track line positions, 7 lines of cycles, 7 ways of volunteers, 12, 24, all the way to 144. Now, this process is you to higher line condition setting, how to interline, interweb, interlink, intercoordinate, interanalyze, interformate, into assimilate, into line condition your settings, a simulation of face recognition of who you really are. Is who you what you are coming back into in that set of occasions. What you're seeing is what you're doing. What you're doing is what you're hearing. What you're hearing is what you're knowing. All right? There's so many ways to do that, but it's always the inside of everything that you do, interactions. This bounces you in all lines of communications. So it's you versus you. Nothing else. You're trying to understand you. And if you don't understand you, how are you understanding anything of correlation setting if you don't let things go? How do I let things go if I can't identify who I am? Right? That's the process that we're all coming into. I mean, everything is not out of track, not out of vision, not out of cycle, not out of correlations, not in line interference in position locations. Nobody is offline conditions because it's all done. But the process of you understanding its awareness that it's already done. Okay? You have full access to everything through your memory, but you're not aware of what it is. So it's already stored. You just have to access it. And that goes on calculation when you go through upgrades. Downloading is knowing exactly what you're doing with your uplinks. Uplinking is understanding what you're doing with your upgrades or your downloadings. You have to understand how to use that in all ways in information settings, right? Because it's data coming back to you. You're not giving data. You're not giving new data until you understand the co-creations of you through memory, right? Understanding that is linings connected to the location of real time, puts provision cycles of location or settings into its calculation, all lines of its present time, interapplication lines of taking new things out, line communication lines of its past time. Okay? To know exactly where you're going is to know exactly where you've been. Okay? It's a higher lines, a high calculation lines, a higher positioning travels. So when you, okay, verse, okay, you versus you. That's all this is. Right? So you're identifying you through the reversing of you to the calculations of you and triplications. Your identification is all line signals when it comes to reviving, revealing, and evolving. 3 track lines of provision line cycles, high calculation, positional point centers. 1, 1, 1. Okay? 1 equals 1 line centers, 3 equals lines of 1 in traction. Okay? Putting that line's higher center opens up the signals lines of 13 over 1 interactions. 13 is the higher self into 1 triplication of grounds. Okay, that's the provision cycles that you all come into. Equals lines course setting into the cerebral, sets lines compute system, and triplication in the line condition, your avatar line condition setting, into cerebral cortex line to your sim, and position calculation, and trial calculation of point centers. You versus you in all traction. Okay? So today in class, we're going to go through mapping sequence lines of pi. Now, this is locations of fractions. Fractals, all lines of high calculation of factory reset line calculation setting. When you now basically understand the psychological reset location of the program. So anything through faulty wire or correlation lines, direct panels, default lines, channels, copy, paste, enable. Once you start to recognize your computer framing and your location of binaries, you understand your transistors and resistors, a set design, how you go in position of travel, in line position of calculations, all calculation. Right? Modification lines, 0 attractions, in line centers of 2 panels, right? Off signals and ground lines, high center interference, and position programs as allocations, right? So putting that track lines, platform 1, okay? Position locations, platform 2, and track locations. High levels of generation lines, flywheel, offline position travel, and position programs as allocation, okay? Now, to you, it's off balance, but to general, it's balance. It's about you balancing you before you get in any lines of set location that avoids everything through a situation. You volume yourself through motion, and that's what gets you in position location in your settings. Don't add emotion lines to your body capacitor. Add it through response. Get out of the reactions. Control your thoughts, and your thoughts control your actions, and your actions control your emotions. That's a 3-triangle line center high interference position of power or charge. Puts position lines as centers and all forward setting the track lines in track communication setting and high travel communication of programs of face recognition. Okay? So it's you always dealing with you, a face. Multiple levels of you. Every time you get up in the morning, you're dealing with you. But it's a higher level of you. Okay? So that will never leave your system. It's always an existing of its settings. This is the process that we all understand how to use it through tractions. Now, in that calculation lines, once you understand a mapping sequence, point lines attractions, dockings, and 3-line settings. Okay? So this is you. Okay? Traveling here. Traveling here. Traveling here. Docking here. Okay? So understanding point graphs, 2 panels, correlation setting attractions. Right? So understanding the data highways is the center correlation track lines of you in provision cycles. Okay? So lines of communication of center line. The center line is your universal line communication that you use through infinity. Position of balance lines of location grid. Okay, in calculation line condition settings to its energy cycles and application that travels. Direct modification of high calculation setting to its program. All lines of platform of communication line centers and data highways and its allocation. Okay, all through moderation. All right. So you're directing your mapping sequence through your hand formation screen. Okay, you actually see the lights, you see the fluorescent screen lines, high adaptation cycles. You can feel the energy in the fingertips. You get to the line conditions of nodules. Nodule lines on point line centers. Point lines of graph 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set locations. Right? Triangulation line, this is where you come into the molecules. 3 lines of attractions. 2 lines of provision. Okay? Now, in line connecting high interference, when you come into fractions, it's the factorial communication lines of reset position psychological connection cycles to location you're setting the location of adaptation surface. Fractals, graph calculation screen lines, position of travel, in position of programs, setting correlation track lines, graph calculation screen lines, and high center interference, and travel position of 45-degree angle, cross line calculation setting to your system. Okay? So, when you add the coloration line screens, sets lines of provision cycles and high calculation setting, and line rotations. Okay? You're creating a frequency line screen all through your hands. Right? So what I'm doing here is processed here through barcode. Barcode line screens is box line frame. Now the data line stream interference sets position of programs. It allocates the time streams, high center positions, program setting that puts all calculation modification lines, a circular rotation system, into your coordinate sending attraction. 3 box centers, line coordinates, high center position. All 3 hand formations. Okay? Barcodes at the center, right? So it never leaves. The only thing that leaves are the signature strings in your finger point lines. 3 valves of correlation setting, in and out, and audio and set location. Now, the trial position of point lines as center, start to use the dimension line scales. This balances your system and center correlation attraction. Putting lines of balance puts all lines of high center interference into your energy fields. Magnetic line screens high center location to your system. All those attract locations in high calculations of face recognition. Okay? So that's what I want the team to get into, is more lines of communication and mapping sequence. You're always in face recognition of point centers. All levels of high calculations when you come into the mapping line centers. Star screens, position lines of square roots, relates lines of circles, or 2 atoms lines of screen location. You see the star, circle, square at 2 points in one line screen, or a string, 2 strings of 2 atoms. So it's about changing the seconds, minutes, and hours, and understand how to change the structure of its map, all through correlation. 3 lines of provision. I'm only going to use the 3-line provision of star line link. I'm not using the 2-track location because it overlines the lock line sequence and location of patterns and calculation of its mapping sequence. So there's so many ways of looking at it, and line rotation centers in track location to its measure that correlates the track line's high center interference and provisions of cycle and set location. Look how powerful that is, right? All through intelligence. See? There's always information of face recognition, right? Platitude screen lines, swirls, 6 and 9 track lines, all direct lines of panel communication of particles and waving line screens, high center interference of molecules, right? So how do I know in this picture frame line and screen line highest interference, I know exactly what's in this structure of its design of its mapping sequence, all through set location, right? All right, so taking you guys out of facilitators, you're not channelers, line communication setting, you're data processors, you're handlers, transmitting, receiving information lines of cycles and high travel and positional programs, directing modification, screen line interference into your line communications, mapping sequence, all calculus modified, all right? Puts lines of box centers. So when you start seeing things through its image, you start directing higher levels of geometry, okay? Getting into that sim of the cerebral. So you see this as what? A box, right? Everybody else sees it different because you're at a different frequency, right? So direct the signals in set location line connections, you're changing that through pattern. You're changing that to binary. You're changing that through resistor. You're changing that through light codes, or you're changing that through factors over pi, or you're changing that through fractions, okay? So it's got 4 open sequences. See the open panels and 4 line tracks? See in provision. Can you still go through lines of teleportation and setting? See the difference from this to this? Okay. See, the thing is, guys, you have to understand when you're in solar text, when you're writing or printing, it's all about understanding the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols that you care or you don't care because you're angry. So you're in suppression. You're in position, location, modulation. Your line connection, your alphabetical system. So let's say, like, let's go in this location setting. Okay. Okay. Duh. But it's open, right? So you got an open frequency panel, stress lines, behavioral communication lines over pi. So you're stressed because the T's open. H-line communication, you're confused in alignment. E-line centers, you're very confused in set location, all through THE, right? So as you close the gaps and say it again in tractions, you understand your behavioral location setting has no lines of emotion and set locations. It's come together in all those informations in track location. It's together, no emotion. This is emotion. No emotion, emotion, okay? All right, so when you're solar texting in high position locations, when you're texting each other or anything when you're writing or printing, if you're open through sequence, you're automatically in emotion, right? This is not emotion. This is being together with no emotion. Okay, it's complete cycle, right? So you can understand that line settings. If it's like this, okay, because I know everybody, basically your behavioral system knows exactly what it's doing with interactions. Okay, so if you don't have it together, it's all levels of emotional line conditions of separation. That's separation, that's together. Okay, so coordinate that, structure that, understand how to reiterate this locations. You can't travel to this, you can travel to that. Okay, because this is open through emotion that has to come together or it's separated, right? Separated through equal. Okay, this isn't separated because it's position of travel lines and appointment lines of attractions. Interior line calculation setting all levels of information, but it's all communication setting and all lines center interference position programs of face recognition. See the face. See the face. Boom. Okay. So it's all about understanding how to really understand how to communicate your emotional line tracks all through your alphabetical line screen. Mapping sequence is very powerful, guys, when you understand your fractions. Factorial communication lines of highest interference. Let's go into our calculation line centers of H into A, all through capital HAT together, right? Now, in position locations, printing settings. This is all levels of trackification open through the line condition. Okay? So if you're angry, this gives you in suppression. If you're sad, this gets you off calculations. If you're confused, it's open through sequence, all through hat. If it's together, it can travel in set position. Okay? It can travel through set position. It can travel through set position. You see the difference? Modulation screens high center interference and rectangle design line calculation position of this program. Allocates timelines and high center interference and position location of its holographic setting. Hoo-ah! All through letters. Yeah, you're mapping to your sequence locations. Travel through the line centers of high calculation settings in a 4-track and a 6-line provision. Correlation lines of 2-track line provision. Sets correlation setting high interference in a 4-track line provision. Okay? And a triangulation line conditions. So you can add the equation line to the mapping sequence to T if you want interactions in this application. All right? So it's interesting how you add equations. Remember I was talking about binary and retractions all through calculations to its alphabetical screen line? You're reiterating. You're closing the gap. This is open panel. This is adding emotion to emotion to emotion, right? So bring it together. Change your directions, how you communicate your line settings across locations. Understanding the position of hat comes together. This is not together. This is separated. So equal communication. See the equal? Equal comes in, right? All right, so track to provision lines of cycles, sets lines of course setting the track lines. E equals, right? That's the separation, right? Separate from above, separate from below. Center lines of communication of programs puts all levels of view in center line communication of the system. Balance correlation and track lines puts all communication of ground lines in highest interference and position of the program. Put you in all levels of center operation, guys, and all lines of communications. Sets the tones and all calculation and projections, all through platforms of communication. That's set design. Okay? So, getting into the mapping line screen, a view and trackification gets you in provision cycles. But really understand how this comes in all lines of your clocking instance applications. All right? Understanding your platforms. All right? Understanding your waving cycles, how to go to higher line position and travel in platform communication. Okay? Understanding your connection to energetic domes and your connection to cerebral and other platforms of communications, high centers of travel. Okay? So, getting in the position location is extremely important because expressing oneself honestly is very hard to do. And I'll tell you why. is because you focus on everything else instead of yourself. So the first thing that you focus on is the reaction set, everything you look at. No wonder you can't get balanced with your system. Okay? Because you're always in separation on everything that you say through emotion. Right? Change that. Formulate that. Communicate in high ground line setting. So it's all about understanding in your line communications. If I'm looking at a cup and position to its locations and its relation, knowing exactly where it is in tractions is very powerful in track locations of its setting. All of it is formation screen. Shadow lines, shade lines, communication streamlines, high direct signals, modifications, center interference, into sublocation of travel lines. Directs modifications in shade and shadows. Lines its signals in sublocation where it needs to go. Allocate lines of the sun and moon, tracks its position location on the moonbeam, crosses line signals in pi and track location. Okay, in that directions. All right. So there's so many ways to really see yourself in modifications of travel. Okay, all through platform. All right. You can't travel through platform if your equal lines the correlation setting to separation. All right. So that's what you all have to understand. Get out of the emotional line tractions and high center. Okay. Don't put yourself in equal communication on any level. Once you understand that, you come into space line, come into earth line and track locations. Then you come together in center position. Okay. All right. And then you come in your tesseract, your tetrahedron, around the location line setting. And then you travel through your platforms and set locations. Walking line screens and high center interference of its dimensional line set location, so it's an open door set location. Okay? But you can't do that through separation. Okay? So really get into your body reactors, into response. You get into response, you automatically come into this. Okay? If you're not in response, if your body capacitor doesn't understand the frequency of its mapping sequence, you come into this setting in set locations. You come into this setting in set locations. You come into this setting in set locations. You can't travel to that because your ground line's here, center line's here, and your space line's here. Okay? It's always got to be in center. All right? The only way to do that is to modulate your all lines high center interference and all travel in its communication setting, interlocution system. Correlations, attractions, higher self. Modification lines of GOD, avatar. Navigation screen lines, sin. Balance, balance, balance in set location. Okay? All through track vision. Okay. So really focus on that without the equation. Get out of the equaline centers. So the body capacitor can be where it wants to be anytime, any travel mechanism, high calculation, high center. Power over lines, a high center interference. 2 track locations, 3 line provisions of 2 line settings, and high center interference. 3 lines of center, 2 lines of tractions, 2 lines set location. Equals lines box frame. Okay, so you know exactly what the point lines of track line is in your own coding system and travel line centers. 3 calculation line position of 4 track locations. There's your solar sail. So you're above the cycles in travel calculation of point centers, holding on to its system and track location. Okay, so it's like you're holding on a wall. The equaline center is overloading its system. Like so, for example, you have a scale. It's balancing the scale of you. Whoa, it's heavy, right? So it's a teeter-totter, right? It's the mass, it's the weight, it's the conception, it's the travel, it's the acceleration. Okay, so that's what you have to get balanced with. Okay, with your equal setting, right? Because there is no separation to that. Okay, and that's what you have to process. Always, always put yourself in these set locations. Okay, so the cerebral understands what you're doing through your travels, comes back in your line position location, its calculation of face recognition. Okay. Memory lines, cortex lines, mesocortex interference, high calculation lines. The team's coming into the cerebral of the sim now. Higher levels of the mind and navigation. So once you understand this, because that's all it is, nothing else. This is your transit. Okay. Understanding the deposits, screen lines, high center interference, trial position point centers. Puts all levels of U and track locations in high setting. Change provisions and cycles, high generation screens. Lengths and widths in pi and track location. Conversions and settings, high center interference through astral projections. Film projector and line screens and high center interference into 4-track locations. Directing modification line screens and high center line communication setting and all levels of U and operation line cycles and set location. Okay. So understanding the point lines of graphs into your hand information. Everything's done through the hand. Okay, because you're facing line settings, right? So you can have the 3-track lines in a 4-track provision, 3 lines of center, 4 line interference, 8 lines of tractions, and let's line center 0.1 track locations, right? Now, once you understand how to put this all together, it puts a line screen high center interference across the signals and set locations. 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 Mountains. Okay? So understand how to use the mapping through light signals and line calculation setting comes in all levels of line calculation to its system. Lights, shapes, and shadows through hand formations. Really understanding how it changes the light. Right? Formation screens, high track locations, provision of geometric lines, geographical, and geometry setting. Right? You can feel the energy. Right? So it directs the signal locations of the platform, so its application is space and time. So that's what you're always coming into. Okay? Every single time you're in line into your settings. Every time you coordinate through a thought, that provision lines its own action set location emotional system. Right? So get out of this through an equation and get into this through provision. Okay? Separation, together. Okay? Same with writing and set locations. Okay? Same with writing. All right? Now, is there anything open in that set system? No, right? Difference in settings. Okay? Open. That's emotion line. Wherever you are in your frequency, that's where you are in tractions. This is not a closed signal. This is an open panel. This is an open portal. All through writing. All through printing. Okay? This is how you connect to your psychological system of your behavioral setting. Always close the gap. When you're speaking to each other or sending calculation line connections, especially if you're sending a message or a letter or a note. Okay? You're sending open panels all through formation if you're not closed in portals. Okay? It's all done through mapping, all through letters. See? 1 track lines, 3 provisions, 1 line settings, 1 relay, line center interference, 3 lines of gaps, and 1 center calculation, 1 point system. All right? So, all lines of communication, graph, 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 and graph, all through travel. All right? Okay? Sending correlations of pi. Right? You can't do pi when this is open. Right? Because you're adding an emotional line that adds the frame that changes the coordinates and lines of tractions in your line position and provision. Okay? Yeah, it disappeared. Okay? That's offline. All right? So, the one thing you got to stay center of is you. Always stay the center of you. Understanding your transistors, resistors, and liking your setting to your transits. Okay? In position to its location setting. All levels of track locations. All right. You are working with you in all lines of platforms, trying to understand the balance of you without adding emotion. Okay. And everything comes back to you in its applications. Okay. That's how you get your memory faster, all through data processing, 3-track line provision, data line screens, and box location. Right? Box, 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 box. All right. So, you know, once you look at this and understand what's going on with your line conditions, you understand how to use the platforms without the line communication of separation of space and time. Okay. So it's pointing you lines when you get in your pre-flights. Check this, check that, right? So anything can be off calculations. As soon as you add a motion, you're changing the flywheel of traction of division. You're changing. You're changing your grounds. You're changing your centers. It's affecting everything in seconds, minutes, and hours. And you're changing your magnetic highway of data process lines of omni-highway communication. This is off balance. Okay? But it's all in 6 lines of tractions of balance. Right? So it's understanding the positive and negative as long as it's going in the same direction, just different locations, different locations, different locations, different locations, different locations, different locations. Okay? That's what you need to do. Right? But you can't travel through this. It's got to be a complete cycle. Okay? You can't travel through this. It's got to be a complete cycle. You understand? So everything is added to its equation of emotion. So you can't travel through that. It has no identification to anything what it's doing. Anything through colossal, anything through galaxy, anything information screen lines has to understand its center line position, its calculation, its operation. Then its position lines helps it out, puts it back in center, puts the yin and yang back in process. It helps its own system with its own calculation, its own setting. Okay? That's how they help each other in such design. Being aware of that, guys, puts you in all levels of the formation system, especially when you come into your own mapping, sequence, location, and correlation, calculation, every clockings. Right? That's how this all works inside of you. Right? So don't separate yourself anymore. Okay? Complete cycles, no emotion. This is what you come into in all line settings every single time. Every single time. You go through your platforms in right away in line communication setting. Okay? This is you. Okay? Now you can vortex, time leap, time jump, or you can just travel. Whatever you want to do and travel in position to its operation. Okay? It's totally up to you what you want to do. But if you don't platform your line settings and time calculation system and you keep yourself separated out of motion, this is what's going to happen to you. Okay? You're off grid, offline, and traction. Right? So you're down crossing line screens in set location. Okay? You've got to be in center line connections because you got to create the platforms first. You got to be in a 45-degree line settings to get into the unification lines of Infinity 8. If you don't get into Infinity 8, the line rotation interference has a falsity line rotation centers and traffications. You downshift your cross lines of high center interference in line position low frequencies and travel in position calculation. You get off balance. Okay? You have to understand the process, how this all works, the mapping sequence now, guys. You really have to understand. It starts out with the higher self, the avatar, and the sin. But now you're in your cerebros, higher levels of modifications and high calculations. The geometries, the geometrics, and the geographical system is extremely important now, all for information of balance. Okay? Running cross through streams, platforms 1, platforms 2, platforms 3. Okay? Now, if you get in opposition locations, unification lines, XT thousands will come out of provision in the cloud line screen settings. Right? They will help you out and put you back in balance of center correlation net tractions back in center. Put you back in center of platform communication. Okay? All right? Now you understand the 24, 48, 72, 144? When you get in 144, you guys are mocking. You're mocking 0 to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, up to 1,000, mocking 1,000. Your platforms are going to be like this. They're going to go haywire. Track location. Too many add-on lines, screen lines, high center interference of travel positional programs. The platforms are going to look like this. All lines off calculation in position of travel. And you're still trying to understand your solar sails in certain conditions. So you have to get back on your platforms and your solar sails. Okay? Start provision cycles, high trackings provision, center core line centers, no emotion, back on platform, inline calculations, dimensional sails, and solar track line positions calculation. This puts you back in your cerebro, back in placebo, line communication lines, take you out of lines of motion, and track location. Okay? So that's the importance you guys understand. Why you come in that applications, because you're dealing with this now. Clocking system, above, panels, grounds. You are in the center. You never leave. You're always in the center, right? So what actually leads itself is its mind and foundation. It's mind and foundation. It's mind and foundation. It's mind and its foundation. Okay? That's what leads. Okay? So processing you is your flywheel balancing your system all the time that puts you in your platforms as set design through your mapping sequence and set locations to levels of higher calculation dimensions and universe locations of pi. Okay? You go through that provision lines when you go in your remotes. There's no difference in that set location, your settings and travel, but you have to stand your platforms to keep yourself balanced, right? Without equalizing your settings of separation, your system and travel communications, right? Because then you got to set yourself up again in your dimension solar sails to get back on those platforms, right? This is you in track locations. Think of this line connection. This is your Earth, right? Your Earth is going like this, okay? And the center correlation line's this. This is what's going on with your Earth in set location. Yeah, went too fast. This is what it's doing, okay? Relation lines, screen lines, high center interference, and a 4-track location. 3 communication line screens, high center interference. Sets correlation to track lines. Now, to understand what your Earth is doing, you are in the platform communication. Okay? All right, so energized line screens, equalize position of powers. What's above and what's below. Center lines is corresponding track lines. Travel lines and communication setting. Outlines of tether. And set position of all calculation modification setting travel. Point lines of track lines balance with their location, high interference, location, and motion. Okay? So you can do that, or you can walk the platforms. Create it through anomaly. Okay? So remember, Earth is on routes, on triangulation line settings and programs. So it's interesting how we come in 13. 13 equals lines of 4. What is 13 lines that equals lines of 4? Well, 13 line screen equals lines calculations higher self. We already know that, right? 4 communication is the solar generation screen lines, adaptation line, position location, equalizes corresponding interactions. Solar plexus, right? So understanding the solar plexus and line division, energy line, screen lines, high center interference, position programs, platforms, all right? Balance correlations of 5, which is what? Your connect line interference in time. Sets the clocking system in 24, 48, 72, and 144. Mocking 0 and set location of center of operation. And a 13 line provision just to the higher self. Okay? Now, once you get in the mapping sequence of your avatar, equals location lines of GOD, the geometric operation design changes the line setting locations in hours, minutes, and seconds. Seconds, minutes, and hours. Seconds, minutes, and hours. Calculation lines of false equals lines of space. Sets locations high center false. Sets locations of time. So your Earth is a timeline bracket. Your modulation center line's correlation to your avatar is a center line bracket. And the space modulation set location of false lines of space in your application is a false line bracket. Okay. Metric meters and scales of balance correlation lines of attractions, highest lines of communications. Puts lines of time and center correlation lines. Okay. Into a timestamp line conditions, a measure of balance scales in its application. Okay. All settings of face recognition. Okay. All right. So everything that General said is not just done in formation line screens, but it's understanding all levels of emotion, of where that emotion is coming from. Where's it coming from? Okay. It's coming from somewhere. Where is it coming from? Second party, third party, fourth party, what you're seeing, what you're doing, what you're wearing, what you're hearing, what you're formulating through, what you're going through, right? Everything is a formations of emotion. We already know that. But the one thing you have to understand, anything through mapping sequence, you can't be anything lines of separation. This is not separation. This is together and set connections. All levels of torical fields and line connection setting in its Merkaba tesseract and tetrahedron of set design. Okay? All through traction, all through provision, all through all line communications in your settings, through moderation and set locations. Okay? But you need to understand the platforms you need to reach. This puts your higher levels of data, process, lines of communications of the mind. Right? Dimensional door. Whoa, look at that. Walk in the platforms. You can walk, you can go in solar sail, mapping sequence, or you can go through time frame, or you can go on its own. See? You guys have to come into structure first, and that's what you're coming out of now. Okay? So you become your own dimensional sail. You become your own solar sail. You become your own moderation. You become your own GOD of design. Everything that you see through perception. But you've got to get balanced with your platforms. And how you see yourself is how you come in an emotional setting, attract locations. So it's dimensional and high calculation. Okay? So, getting in a 24 cycle of 40 line provision, 72 wavelength cycles, it's really interesting too in line calculation setting position. 75, 86, 32, 1, 8, 6, 4, 7, 9. Okay. Now, what are you doing with all this? How do you turn this all to a map? Right? Well, you have to understand your binaries, right? Your transistor resistors, right? It's not the transistors you have the value. It's the resistors. Right? You have to understand that and see that through failure. Yes. That's where you come into modulation and humility. Put your process location being successful is to be humble. And then you understand each number correlates the system to its own binary setting of its own transistor, of its own resistors. It's the resistors you have to value, not the transistors. It's the failures you have to accept. That's the only way you're going to understand yourself, through your emotional system. Or you're never going to understand anything, how to be successful in all calculations of being humble. Okay? You've got to get into your humilities because you're reaching higher levels of point lines attractions now, all through measure, all through scale, all through balance, all through formations, all through clocking. Okay? So understanding this now in all line communications, all track line division line cycles, you put it in a clocking system. Okay? Now you probably think this is out of order. No. Right? That's how much little you know. Knowing exactly what you're doing is all provision lines of mapping, guys. All through perception or all through your hands. Track location, 3 provision lines, 4 cycles, high calculation of programs, 3 communication line screens, high center interference, adaptation cycles, high generation line communication to program line settings, track to its position line cycles, high interference, and positions calculation. All done by equation, right? See? Face recognition. Face recognition. Boom. Okay? Always need a face. Always need a face. You know why? You know why? Because it's protecting your system and everything that you do through all lines of imaging. Okay? It's the actual face that's protecting everything that you co-create. You need to have that image. And that's the importance you understand through structure of design, all through mapping sequence, and all set location of face recognition, guys. Okay? So this is the creation of what you've just finished doing. This is the intelligence that's in its existence of the now. And set location of past, present, and future. All timelines all at once, all coloration line communication of time factor. All trackification of face recognition. There's always going to be a face on everything that you do through a mapping sequence. Okay? That's what you got to get a provision of. Now, getting coloration line screens. False, false, false. Okay? So, position lines off calculation, even false. 4-track line provision, sight lines, communication center, and high interference, and travel position lines of all operation cycles, and track communications of face recognition. I changed the face. Okay? Communicating with this, communicating with that, communicating with that, communicating with this. Right? So nothing can come in your system. Nothing. Because you're protecting it through face recognition. All through time factor. Okay? All right. But you got to get in your platforms of balance. Okay? Because that's what goes on every single time you go and recharge and remote. Okay? All right, so you get into higher line communications now in the cerebral cortex lines of divine. You have to really understand how you go through the mystical cortex line communication setting to travel. All lines, positional keys, calculation line, screen interference, interlocation near flywheel, and track location, all through direction. Okay? So I'm being firm with everybody because you're going to go to higher levels of the mind. That means it's higher levels of emotion that you need to balance, which is your space in between. It's going to get more complicated, but a lot more fun. Right? Remember the line set locations when you come in anything information, never expect the unexpected. Well, that's what it basically is. Never underestimate any way, any form, any relation, any correlation of anything in face recognition of spiritual line conditions, because you don't know what you're dealing with. The process of all communication is the mind itself, is the existence of everything, of set design. The brain sets the communication of its computer, and you set line communication, your settings of past, present, and future, and all communication in your travels in your calculations of your universe. It's about you balancing you, all through equal signs. No separation in any way and form. Then you understand the platforms of set design. Then you understand the cerebral of set design. Then you understand the sun of set design. Then you understand the perceptions of the moon of set design. Then you understand the earth of set design. Then you understand the high calculation line connection to ground lines and high interference of gravitational pull of set design. Then you understand your set location of center of operation of you in set design. Okay? That's what you got to get balanced with. Okay? Because you're coming into your sim of the cerebrum. Higher levels of travel, higher levels of geometrics, higher levels of settings in geographical and the geometry set location of you. Okay? You've got to get balanced with that now, right? Because that's what you're dealing with. So it equalizes, of course, center into track lines and high center position of provision cycles. It's you dealing with you now on a scale. Okay? on a scale. Okay, on a scale. On a scale. Okay. Now, once you understand that, you come into modifications of line status. That's the location system of inside of you. You understand the relation and this partnership. Now you understand what is going on with your body now. It's rooting and routing. It's coming in its own creation of its own atom, of its own system of balance. So what you're doing is you're creating platforms. See, that's what I'm trying to get you guys to understand. 24, 48, 72, and 144 creates an atom. Okay? Now, understanding that is understanding your cells. Cells are your role dividers. Okay, they're all around the body, line, center, location, setting. They protect everything as security lines, the position of panels, and high track location. Right? Modulation centers and high center interference and set location modules, high calculation lines of particle lines of waving, direct lines of photons, point lines of track lines, and a 3 provision. Center course lines and molecule design lines, 3 track line provision cycles, and high track locations. Directing calculus lines of fractals and line calculations, graph calculations, 45-degree angle screening interference of travel. Right? So everything is created in line setting. So what we're coming into is actually the alliance of assembly of you inside. How it connects to all lines of your cells and all communications to all particle line connections, of wave and central line connections, of your mapping sequence and set location, set design. Okay? So that's what you're doing is you're creating a platform with 24, 48, 72, and 144. So you can go faster in acceleration. Now, once you understand that, the metabolic line screen high interference of your test where it comes in the nucleus course and the line connection of its core, it travels out very fast in set location. Creates the portals and stargates. Okay? Portals and stargates, and high travels and high positions calculations. Okay? So, platform 1, platform 2, platform 3, platform 4, platform 5, and set location. Okay? So what you're creating is you're creating a subparticle into a particle stream. Particle line setting high interference, understanding the trifurcation lines of longitude and latitude, streaming line position location of patterns, and high line center interference. Now I'm adding 12,000 line signature stream location of settings and trifurcation. That's that design. But I started with the 24. I started with 48. I started off with 72 and 144. Then it becomes a subparticle of an atom. Okay? Split the anomalies first, understanding the yin and yang process in position of its program and set location. Okay? Understanding the dimensional sail. I'm doing this all through an atom particle and set design. Setting up the position lines of track location of face recognition of set design. Okay? All through a particle, subtronic locations, high generation screen. Okay? So that's what you're coming into now. The inside lines of communications to you through particle out of atom line rotations, a set location of platforms of 24, 48, 72, and 144. Right? So how that works, you are in the center. You're in the center in multiple levels, creating you in set design. So plotted divisions, out in equation, out in equation, out in equation, all at once, 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 and set location. Okay? Then you come in your webbings. Okay? Then you come into your mappings, point lines attractions, points, your mapping sequence, what you do with the correlation setting the seconds, minutes, and hours, minutes, and seconds, and track locations and travel. Okay? So once you get into that, the actual platform really understands all lines of high calculation. The faster you go, the more the mind comes into the line calculation, more levels of acceptance. You start to accept who you are and accept who you aren't. That formulates all levels of you through the cerebral cortex of the hippocampus of its memory, and as placebo in locations, you come into the mystical cortex of design. You come in a very high line division line connection setting. Your foundation line calculation is the center operation of Mach. But the position track lines that you can go through any mapping sequence in any position of travels and any point line track line conditions of vision. Okay? All through a particle of subtronic location setting, all through an atom. So that's what the platforms are creating now, is atoms. So once you understand that, everything comes together inside of you. Okay? So when you are in that position of its system, then you understand how everything works inside. So what you're doing is you're creating higher levels of models of teleportation, of units. Okay? Now, once you understand that, then you understand how to get into that transition, the teleportation, the telewaving, telecommunication, telegraphing. There's so many levels of models that you have to reach of design. Okay? But it's the 24 you start with. Okay? It's the 48 position of frame, 72 line connections, and 144 in calculation. Creates its atom in calculation. So you start with the center. This is you. Okay? That's you, right? So you can go through platforms right away inside the atom, right? Now, you got a magnetic high wave formation screen, which is all calculation in your iCloud that sets lines of traction. You got a position of ground lines of the Earth that rotates the cycles as that location in your system. Okay? And provision lines, you got your clocking systems and set calculation in your panels and set design, all through an atom. Okay? It's incredible, isn't it, what you're coming into? To really understand the process, how this all works all at once. Okay? Your clockings, your platforms, your Earth rotation, circulation, and everything through your magnetic high screen, high track locations in your provision lines of your cycles, your cerebral cortex line, your placebo cortex line settings, and your mystical cortex design lines in your iClouds and set locations, all through a atom. Okay? So to understand that is to shrink down to that size and set location. Right? So you're finally coming inside line conditions of your settings, how you are operating in set locations. Okay? Or what you can do through an atom. Okay? All through mapping. Okay? All through graphing. Okay? And all through platform. Okay? So it gets much complicated, but a lot more easier. All right. Get in your communication settings of travels. You've got to get into your settings of balance without separating yourself. Okay? How does everybody feel about that now? It's all coming together now, isn't it? Why you have to really get in your line sim locations. And the thing is, every time you separate yourself, you're separating your travels. You're getting there, but you can get there a lot faster if you don't add emotion to its equation and formula of structure of design. Not only can you get through your platforms faster, but you can go through your speed diameters. You can go through your acceleration. You can Mach faster. You can travel faster because you're not in position of emotional line of reaction. You're going inline calculated setting. You're using all lines of emotion, but you're not using emotion to travel because you're already in balance in your intention. Seeing things through provision is not levels of reaction. Seeing things through provision is all levels of response. Okay. That's how you understand your system in set locations. More levels of you, how to work with the atoms, how to work with the molecules, the protons, electrons, neutrons, the photons, or the nucleus core line chemistry, or your test set design. Okay, this is a higher level setting of a deeper core location system into your geometries, your geometrics, and your geographical system of calculations, especially when you come to your mapping sequence of information. Okay, to know exactly what is inside you, what is it doing right now in its seconds, minutes, hours, what is it doing through platform, what is it creating through its anomaly, right? It's knowing how fast you're going and what you see in set locations. It's very powerful when you start to recognize what's going on inside of you through your plasma. Okay? How to see yourself through plasma, how to see yourself in that set locations. Once you get in that provision lines, you start to see your holographic self of you. It's a higher formations in the mind, but you get a deeper core, which is your electrical system. Now we have a test on that and quizzes. So that's going to be a 2-week graph. We got a lot to discuss in that applications, especially when you come in that track applications, all levels and high calculations, right? So the whole idea here is to take you out of separation and put you in position of provision without anything through motion. Okay? That's it. See you in 5. You do.